Right, hello. So yesterday what I did was that I primed all of my wardrobe doors and these edges that I'm planning to paint grey as well. So today what I'm going to do is that I'm just going to paint them the color that I want them to be, which is grey. So yeah, I think that's all I'm going to do today. Later I'm going to be collecting the wood from the wood supplier. So I don't have a lot of time today to be doing this. One of my worry is that these surfaces they are really hard to paint because they need all four surfaces to be coated. I don't have those things to you know, like raise up the pieces of wood. But before I can start painting the surface, I need to sand it down so my paint doesn't look like shit. Okay.
Yeah, so I'm just sanding down the wardrobe doors. One of the problems that I faced was that I didn't have a proper place to leave my doors to dry, and that became a big problem because even though I try to like space them apart and not have them adhering like face to face, sometimes I forget or the pieces like slide out of place, and so as you can see here, parts got stuck, and when I tried to remove them by prying, an entire piece came off. Yeah, so because of that I had to use more wood putty to fill up the hole. Yeah, you can see it there at the back. So it wasn't that big of a deal for this specific case, but when it came to the paint layer or the varnish, like having layers of the varnish peel off is kind of irreversible, and I can't really fix that by just like applying more layers of varnish. So yeah, definitely should have paid more attention to the pieces adhering when they haven't completely dried. But yeah, I guess hindsight is 2020. Yeah, so now I'm just applying the first coat of the interior paint onto the wardrobe doors. Yeah, I made sure to wipe everything down before I started painting them because you never want dirt inside your paint. Yeah, and this is the second coat after I've let them dry. Yeah, so I sanded down the first layer lightly before I continued with my second layer to get rid of any possible like dirt. Okay, yeah, so I took a break to go and pick up the wood from the wood supplier, and that's all the pieces of wood fitting in my dad's car. Yeah, so this is how I let them dry at the end of the day, just like in between some stools and a bucket of water. And this is how I tried to space the smaller doors apart and minimize like any face-to-face contact. And yeah, I also painted the sides and edges of the wardrobe.
Today is the 28th of January. I'm going over to the hardware store that's next to my house to just buy some stuff, particularly sandpaper. So my wardrobes are dry. I'm gonna be putting them up today, but then they're kind of like covered with like a bit of like dust and shit like that. Some got stuck before like the paint was completely dry, so they've kind of embedded themselves. I think by like lightly sanding it, I'm able to get them off without affecting the paint too much. Yeah, so I just bought two pieces of 350 grit and 500 grit each.
Yeah, I decided to use the 500 grit just to make sure that I don't scratch off any of the paint. And yeah, as you can see now, I'm just doing a very light sanding before I start to reattach the hinges. As you can see here, this piece, one of the edges, I just completely forgot to paint, so I did that later. Yeah, even though I made the effort not to scratch anything, there were still areas where the top layer of the paint had come off. So yeah, but that wasn't a big deal because I could just spot paint it after I installed the doors. Yeah, so now I'm just attaching the handles onto the door by measuring a set distance from the top. yeah, to make sure everything's level. And then yeah, I just started trying to reattach the door.
So I put up the smaller doors, right? And then there's this like huge gap. In fact, it used to be much smaller. But the problem was that I couldn't open the doors and close it properly. Because they're so close to each other, whenever they open, they will bump into each other. So I removed this filler thing at the edge. But when I did that, that makes this one really small. So yeah, I'll definitely have to shift this a bit. But yeah, I'm just going to continue with the big doors. Then after everything is done, I'll try to troubleshoot the door spacing problem. So this is going to be my desk. I'm not very sure whether this is closer or further away. I have to look at my schematic. Roughly, right, this is the layout of the underside. First, like these pieces will be on below the table. And then this board will be here. And they fit just nice. So this entire depth will be 75 cm. And then the two legs here and here. This piece will be here, and then it will be hinging this way. Other than that, there's this corner piece. Oh, I should specify. I wanted the grain for this board to be this way. I forgot to remind the supplier. So now the grain is that's annoying. Yeah, so now the grain is gonna be like perpendicular at the edge. So okay, so this one's gonna be vertical here. I think this goes either like this or like that, I'm not very sure. This one's gonna be flat like this. So this one's gonna be here and here. Ow! Man, the plywood is really rough. What I'm gonna be needing to do is to sand down all of the plywood. And then there are a bunch of like holes in the plywood. So I'll be needing to fill them up with wood putty. Oh, me lah.
Alright, more sanding. The amount of sanding that I did for this project, I guess I didn't really expect having to do so much. But then, like the plywood that I received was like really rough on the edges, and yeah, so I definitely had to make sure I get rid of all of like the roughness and like the loose bits that were at the end of the wood. So yeah, I just went around just going through every single piece of plywood beam, and then after that I progressed onto the plywood boards and then the pinewood boards. At least the pinewood boards weren't as rough.
I spent the past few hours just like putting the wood putty on all of this side. I haven't done the back side and the boards of plywood. I think I'm gonna stop for dinner. After dinner, I'll just come back and repeat this for all three other sides. Hello. So what I did yesterday is that I covered both sides of the plywood with wood putty. I'm gonna sand down the surfaces.
So yeah, after covering all the edges with wood putty, I need to go back and sand it again. Because ideally I want as little wood putty as possible, so I want the actual grain of the wood to show, and only in areas that there are holes or there are inconsistencies I want the putty to remain to like fill up the gaps. So yeah, I'm just going back to sand down all of the surfaces to get rid of any of the excess wood putty.
Alright, it's the 2nd of February. I took a break for CNY, but I'm back. So tomorrow I'm gonna start dyeing the wood. I'm gonna start with black first because it's less risky. Like if I mess up, it's just black. But then once I start using the other dye, where like the actual grain will start showing through, right, there's no going back if I f that up. To prep the wood for dyeing, I need to get rid of all the random bits of wood putty that I've been using to fill up the sides, and to really sand down the surface one last time with 220 grit to make sure the surface is flat and ready for the dye. And then I think I'm gonna end the day by wiping everything down, making sure there's no random bits of wood dust anywhere. One thing is also that for some of the pieces, right, especially for the corner edges, I need to round the corners. I think I'm just gonna manually do it with my sander, even though that's gonna be quite inefficient.
Yeah, as for rounding the corners, initially I wanted to rent a router to do the corner rounding for me, but I couldn't find one that was affordable for rent. So yeah, I just had to round the corners myself, as you can see now. So because this is the last sanding before I start dyeing the wood, I had to make sure my work surface was clean so I don't like press the wood piece that I'm trying to clean onto a dirty surface and then like defeat the purpose of me trying to clean my piece of wood. So yeah, I had to like wipe down my work surface every single time and then sand it and wipe it down and sand it. So that took longer than the previous times. That's it, most of the sanding was already done. So for this time of sanding, the bulk of what I was trying to achieve is to get rid of any of the wood putty that had adhered itself onto the surfaces where I didn't want it. Yeah, so I moved on to the Pinewood boards. Like I said before, they were already pretty smooth, so my focus was on just giving it a final sand to get rid of any imperfections. And I also had to round the corners, as you can see here, just slowly going from one side to the other at an angle to just smooth out any of the corners. Yeah, so as this fades out, I just repeated it for all the other pieces.
I just went to wipe down every single surface of all the pieces of wood that I have with a rag. So now the surfaces are mostly free of sawdust. Right, so I have two different types of wood dye. So this one's ebony, which is just black, and then this one, which is Burmese teak. So these pieces of plywood won't be dyed, they're just going to be varnished and they're going to just be a darker shade of this color. Then everything here, all these pieces will be dyed black, and then these pinewood pieces will be dyed this Burmese teak. Yeah, so that's what I'm going to be doing tomorrow.